when you're writing tools for AI agents to use, something that's frequently required is you want a large language model like Claude or something to write code and then execute it. Now, this is kind of a bad idea from a safety point of view from your computer, because you don't really want to basically give anything, you don't want to give any system like command line access to your computer. Basically, you don't want to allow the computer to run arbitrary code. And if you're getting Claude to develop code or something and then run it, then that's kind of exactly what you're doing. So today what I'm going to do is show you how to write an MCP server that runs in a Docker container. And so what happens is all of the code gets executed inside the Docker container. So this is kind of similar to, you might allow Claude to use a computer, but only allow Claude to use like a virtual machine on your computer. And then that means that your actual data and stuff on your regular machine is protected from the Docker container. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a basic example that allows Claude to execute arbitrary Python code, but it does this from within a Docker container. So in principle, it can't access the information on my computer. So the way that I'm going to do this is in Python there's a function called exec. So if you write a string that contains Python code in Python and then run exec, then this executes the Python code. So what I could do is I could do something like write a function called like run Python, and then this takes as an argument some code, which is a string, and then executes the code. So right, so now I could do like run, I mean this is literally just the exec function. Right, so then this executes the code. And what I can do is I can define a function in an MCP server that runs this code. And then if I run that whole MCP server in Docker, then Claude will be able to run the code from, Claude will have access to this tool which can run arbitrary Python code, but it can only do it from within the Docker container. So that's what I'll do now. So I'm going to make a new Python project. And so what I need to do is I need to write a Docker file. So I'm going to use Python 3.13. I'm just going to define a work directory that's going to be applications, and then I want to copy, say, everything from source into app, and then finally I want the container to run the Python script. Okay, so what I can do is then make the source file, the source folder, and then make a file called main.py, and then let's just print hello from Docker. So now if I run, if I build this with Docker and tag it with MCP server, then I can run this. we see that it's executed that code. So that code is executed from the Docker container. So now what I want to do is run this as an MCP server. So to do that, I need to edit the Docker file to install some requirements. So what this will do is this will copy. This will then install the requirements.txt. So I need to add requirements to this. So the requirement, the package that I need to install is the MCP package from Anthropic. So now if I build the Docker container again, it's going to install the requirements. It's going to install the MCP thing. And now what I need to do is actually write the MCP server in Python. So to do that, let's edit the main file. So we can get rid of this. And then so I'm going to use the fast MCP class to quickly make an MCP server. So this is just and then I'm going to define my MCP server to just be so I'm just going to give it a name that's Docker, and then I can write something like mcp.tool, something like get message from Python. So from Docker, let's see. So it's going to return a string. So and then when we run this, we want to run the MCP server. So if we execute this Python file, then it's going to run this. Okay, so now what we can do is we can test whether we can actually run this MCP server without giving any errors. So let's do docker run. We need to build it first. And let's run the MCP server, so docker run. Okay, so because it's not giving an error, this is running correctly. And then what we can do is we can add this to Claude. So if we open Claude, then I don't have any MCP servers installed at the moment. And so to install an MCP server, you can go on the settings, click on developer, and then go to edit the configuration. And this makes a config file that you can then edit. So, so this creates this config. And so what I want to do is add in a MCP server's dict into the JSON file. Let's call our MCP server Docker. And the command is, and so we have to tell Claude how to run this MCP server. And so basically we just need to run the command that we just ran. So this needs to be, the command is docker, and then the arguments are given by, we want to do what we just did, so we want to do run. I need to add a comma here. I want to run, and then I'm going to use the interactive flag. And what this does is it allows Docker it allows the program running this Docker container to interact with it through the standard input and output. and then the name of the container is MCP server, because I tagged it with that name when I ran the when I did the Docker build. I added this MCP server. Okay, so let's write that, and then we have to quit Claude and then open Claude again. And now we see we have this tool that's get message from Docker. So we could say something like, what is the message? Message from Docker, and then it should run this code. So this is a much safer way of running MCP servers, because the only code because any interaction from Claude to the MCP server is going to run inside the Docker container. So it doesn't have access to, system files and things like that. And it's really not really any more difficult to write an MCP server that runs inside a Docker container versus just writing an MCP server. If anything, this config is much easier than writing the configs for things that run in Python. So this is an example config that I'm, for other MCP servers that I have that aren't running in Docker containers. And it's a bit more complicated to set up, because you have to basically, say if I want to run Python, so I want to run a Python script, but I need to, first cd into the correct directory so that, the Python script is running correctly. And then if I have any dependencies from the Python script, then, I need to make sure that it's running the correct version of Python in the correct environment, things like that. So running in the Docker container actually simplifies the config. I mean, it is slightly more complicated if you wanted to use, say, for example, you can do things like running a virtual web browser and things. And if you wanted to do that, then it's more complicated, because you kind of need to run the web browser on the computer, not in a Docker container, to get a kind of visual output from it. But this is but that's kind of a specialist use case, and for many applications you will be able to just write it inside a Docker container. So another option for running code inside Docker containers is, instead of writing, you can write code that you can write the MCP server so that it is running inside a Docker container. But another thing that you can do if you want, say, Claude to execute arbitrary code, is you can get the MCP server, you can write an MCP server as normal, and then call Python scripts that, and then get the MCP server to execute the code inside a Docker container. So the MCP server is running on the computer, but the functions that it's able to execute but when it executes code, it sends that code to a Docker container to run. So an example that I've been working on is using Claude to run Lean, is to write code in a language called Lean, which can be used to write sort of formal proofs of mathematical statements. And so I'm going to make another video on this. So what I do there is I write the MCP server in Python, but then get Claude to execute code inside a Docker container. And so the way this code works is I have a folder called workspace, which I allow Claude to write to using the MCP server, so it can read files in the workspace and it can write to that. So, it can write text files. And then I have these tools that allow it to basically execute the command. So this runs Lean and then the file. So this is the same as running like Python and then giving the name of the script. And this code is then run inside the Docker container. And so this means that Claude is able to write code that it's able to run, but it can only create things inside the Docker container. So an example, so what I might want to do is really run this inside a Docker container when I have these kind of write file and refile commands. So this has a slight security flaw, because say I'm in this workspace folder, and if I open a terminal in this window, if I run Python in this folder, so this is running inside the workspace folder, then I can still access data from the folder above it by just doing something like, for example, I can write something like I can go up a directory and then say something like run container. And then, read the contents of the file. Right, this is, even though Python is running in this workspace folder, I can still access and write data. If I was to write a file, if instead of reading I was writing a file here, this would overwrite the document run container. Right, and this is a security flaw when you're writing your MCP servers, because you don't want, running this code. Claude can, just delete files on my computer if it wants to, by writing the right file name here, sort of relative to where the MCP server is running. I mean, it doesn't do that at the moment, but in principle it could. There could be some error in the file, or it could just pass. It could probably work out that I'm running on Mac OS, and it could pass a absolute file name here, and then so this sort of I guess this would stop that because I'm joining the path. But in principle, it can write code, it can write to wherever it wants to write. And so if you use a Docker container, then it won't be able to do that, because the Docker container will mount the workspace directory in at some location on its file system, and then it won't be able to go above the directory there. So this is kind of a way of making sure that the MCP servers that you write are actually safe. So thanks for watching. This has been how to run MCP servers in a Docker container. And I really think that, if you're writing MCP, if you're writing code that's going to be executed by Claude or any other AI systems, or really just writing code that's going to be executed by any sort of external system, then you should really keep these sort of safety concerns in mind. So subscribe if you find this interesting. I'm going to make some more videos about the kind of this lean, getting Claude to write formal proofs of things. And I've also set up a Ko-Fi page, so if you want to support the channel, then you can look there. That page is going to be kind of like a central hub for everything that I'm doing. So thanks for watching, and hope to see you in another video.